the joke that started it. All the palace of the alien queen was not a place for jokes. The human knew this the moment he stepped inside the grand chamber. Tall black pillars rose toward the ceiling like endless trees, carved with glowing runes that pulsed as if alive. Silver banners hung from the walls, and armored alien guards stood in lines, their strange spears glowing with faint blue light. The air itself felt heavy, filled with the weight of tradition and judgment. Every step the human took echoed loudly, reminding him that he was alone in a place where he did not belong. He had been brought to the Queen's court after a strange series of events. The humans and this alien empire had only recently made contact, and tensions were high. Some said the Queen wanted to study him. Others whispered that he was being tested. Whatever the reason, he was nervous, and his nervousness made him speak without thinking. At the far end of the chamber sat the alien queen, her crown made of crystal and bone. Her eyes glowed faintly with a golden hue, and her presence made even her own people bow low. Beside her stood her nurse, a tall alien woman with graceful movements. Her face carried no expression, but her eyes studied the human carefully, as if measuring his worth. The human felt the silence pressing down on him. Dozens of alien eyes watched his every move. They waited for him to speak, but his mouth was dry and his heart pounded in his chest. He wanted to ease the tension, to break the silence. So, in a moment of weakness and humor, he looked toward the nurse and said softly, "Yes, dear, it was a joke, a human joke." Something said when one wanted to playfully agree without meaning it. He expected no one to understand. He expected the words to vanish into the air like smoke, but instead the nurse stopped. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Her first smile since he entered the chamber. Then, in a clear voice that carried through the entire court, she said one word, "Mate." The hall froze. Not a sound. Not even the hum of the energy lamps. The Queen's guards stiffened, their weapons twitching in their hands. The advisors leaned forward. Whispering in alarm, the courtiers gasped, their faces showing shock and disbelief. The human blinked, confused, not understanding what had just happened. The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly, golden fire glowing brighter within them. Her voice was low, calm, and dangerous. "Do you know what you have spoken, human?" she asked. Her words cut through the silence like a blade. The human raised his hands awkwardly, trying to laugh it off. "It was just a joke," he said quickly. "Something we say. Nothing serious." But no one laughed. No one moved. Every alien in the hall stared at him with a mixture of fear and awe. The nurse, however, did not laugh. Her eyes softened, her expression calm, as though she had just accepted something important. And again she repeated softly, "Mate!" The human's stomach dropped. He looked around. Desperate to understand what he had done wrong, the whispers grew louder now, strange alien words passing quickly from mouth to mouth. He could not understand the language fully, but he recognized the tone. It was the tone of prophecy, of destiny, of law. The Queen raised her hand, and the hall fell silent once more. Her gaze bore into him with an intensity that made him feel small. "In our tongue," she said, her voice echoing. "The words you spoke are no jest. They are an ancient vow, spoken only when one accepts a bond of soul and life. When our nurse called you mate, she accepted that vow, and now it binds you both." The human's mouth went dry. His joke, his foolish joke, had turned into a binding declaration. The guards shifted uneasily. As if unsure whether to strike him down or bow to him, the advisors argued in whispers, some demanding punishment, others insisting it was fate. The nurse simply stood still, her calm eyes never leaving his face. She looked neither afraid nor regretful. She looked. Certain, the human tried again to protest, his words stumbling. "I didn't mean it. I didn't know," he said. But the Queen's gaze silenced him. Meaning or not, the words had been spoken. And in this hall, in this culture, words had power. The human felt the weight of 100 alien stares pressing on him. A cold fear settled in his stomach, but along with it came something else. Suspense, uncertainty, and a strange awareness that his life had just changed forever. He had spoken a single joke, and with it, had crossed a line he did not even know existed. The court waited, holding its breath. The queen studied him like a predator, and the nurse. She smiled again, the same calm smile, as though destiny itself had answered her. The joke was no longer a joke. It was the beginning of something he could not yet understand. And deep inside, he knew this was only the start of a story that would test him in ways he never imagined. The silent court's reaction. The chamber remained frozen in silence after the nurse's single word. Her calm voice still echoed in the human's ears, and though she had spoken softly, it carried a weight that seemed to anchor itself inside every stone pillar of the queen's hall. The human shifted uneasily, glancing around, hoping for someone to laugh or dismiss the moment, but not a single alien dared to even breathe too loudly. It felt as if the very air had become heavy, trapping him in a cage of unseen laws he could not understand. The alien courtiers filled the great hall, their skin shimmering in colors that shifted with their emotions, and now those colors danced between fear and disbelief. Some had markings on their foreheads that glowed faintly, and those lights flickered nervously as they leaned close to whisper in hushed tones. To them, the human had not made a harmless joke. He had spoken an ancient vow, and the nurse's response had sealed it. It was a bond older than politics, older than war, a bond tied to their deepest traditions. The queen sat upon her throne, her golden eyes sharp and burning like the suns of her world. Her crown of crystal shimmered faintly, catching the light of the glowing runes carved into the walls. When she finally moved, lifting her hand slightly, the whispers ceased as though a great storm had suddenly been silenced. All eyes turned toward her, waiting for her judgment. The human swallowed hard, his throat dry. "I didn't mean it," he said, his voice trembling with an edge of panic. "It was just something we say, back where I come from. A joke." But the words felt thin in the vast hall, and no one seemed convinced. The queen leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "Your words, human, are not empty here," she said, her voice carrying the weight of law itself. "Our people do not jest with vows, nor do we speak lightly of bonds. When you said those words, you tied yourself to one who answered, and now the court must see what is to come." The guards standing at the sides of the chamber shifted their spears uneasily. Their eyes were locked on the human, but they did not move against him. It was as if they, too, feared the meaning of the bond. Some advisors rose from their seats, their cloaks brushing against the stone floor as they pointed their clawed fingers toward the human. One of them hissed, "This cannot be allowed. He is an outsider. He does not know our ways. The vow must be broken before it poisons the court." Another advisor, older and with deep lines carved into his scaled face, shook his head. "No vow can be broken once accepted. It is law older than the throne itself." The nurse answered him, "And now his fate is bound to hers. If we strike him down, we risk dishonor. If we ignore it, we risk chaos. The stars themselves will judge us." The human stood frozen, his heart pounding. He felt like a man who had stepped on a hidden switch without knowing what it would do. And now the entire alien empire was waiting to see if the explosion would consume them all. He tried to read the expression of the nurse who had called him mate, but her face remained calm, her lips curved in the faintest trace of serenity, her gaze steady and unwavering. It was as though she had been waiting for this moment all her life. The court began to argue loudly, some voices sharp with anger, others heavy with fear. The noise rose like a storm until the queen slammed her hand against the armrest of her throne, the sound echoing like thunder across the hall. "Enough," she commanded, and silence fell once more. Her golden eyes locked on the human, unblinking, sharp as blades. "You spoke, and the vow was heard." The nurse accepted. "The bond is sealed. You may call it a joke. But in this hall, in this empire, words are chains, and chains do not break by laughter." The human's knees felt weak. He wanted to protest again, to shout that he never meant it. But something inside him told him the more he argued, the deeper he sank. The court's stares weighed down on him, and he began to feel like an insect under glass, watched, judged, and powerless. He realized then that this was no misunderstanding that could be easily explained away. This was a ritual, a sacred law, and he had stumbled into the heart of it. One of the younger guards stepped forward nervously, his armor clinking faintly. "My queen," he said, bowing his head low. "What is to be done with him now?" The queen did not answer immediately. Instead, she turned her gaze toward the nurse. The nurse lowered her head slightly, her voice calm and steady as she said, "He is mine." The words sent another ripple of shock through the court. Some gasped, others muttered, and one advisor even rose to leave in outrage. But the queen's expression did not change. Only her glowing eyes flickered faintly. She leaned back in her throne, her fingers tapping against the armrest as though she weighed the future of her empire in her mind. Finally, she said, "Then let it be so. The vow has been spoken, the bond is sealed. We shall see if this human is worthy of what he has claimed." The human's heart raced, confusion and fear twisting inside him. He had done nothing but joke, yet now his life was no longer his own. The court stared at him with a mixture of awe, suspicion, and hostility. The nurse watched him with calm certainty, as though she knew something he did not, and the queen, silent once more, sat upon her throne like a shadow of judgment. The air thickened with suspense, and the human felt the walls of fate closing in around him. This was no longer about a joke, it was about destiny. A destiny he had never asked for but could no longer, a dangerous bond revealed. The hall remained tense long after the queen declared the vow sealed. The alien courtiers shifted uneasily, their colors flickering with unease, and whispers filled the air like restless winds. The human stood in the center of it all, his chest tight, his hands slightly trembling though he tried to keep them still. He had walked into this place expecting judgment, maybe even interrogation, but not this. Not a bond that tied his life to someone else's with a few careless words. The queen's voice rose again, slow and deliberate, carrying the weight of a ruler who spoke not only for herself but for the countless generations of tradition behind her. "You should understand, human. What has been spoken cannot be taken back in our people's ways. A vow of this kind binds not just the body but the spirit. It is deeper than blood, older than law. It is written into the very bones of our history." She leaned forward, her golden eyes narrowing. "The nurse has accepted you, and by doing so, she has placed your life under the shield of the bond, but with it comes responsibility and danger." The human felt his mouth go dry. "Danger?" he asked, his voice weak but still carrying in the silence of the court. He had no idea what she meant, but the queen's words made it sound far more than symbolic. One of the elder advisors stepped forward, his long robe trailing behind him as he lifted a clawed hand. "The bond cannot be broken, not by you, not by her, not even by the queen herself. Once spoken and answered, it is sealed. To reject it is to invite destruction. To mock it is to invite death, for in our traditions, a broken vow of the bond calls upon the judgment of the ancestors, and they do not forgive." The human's stomach dropped. He had thought maybe he could just explain it away, convince them that it was a misunderstanding. But now he understood there was no path to escape so easily. This was not a contract to be signed or canceled. It was a sacred law that lived in the hearts of an entire people. The nurse, standing tall and calm beside the throne, finally lifted her gaze to meet his, her voice soft but firm. "You spoke the words, and I accepted. From this moment, you are mine, and I am yours. You may not have meant them, but meaning is irrelevant. The bond listens only to truth, and truth does not care for intention." Her words struck him harder than any weapon. He wanted to argue, to shout that it was unfair, but when he looked into her steady eyes, he found no malice there, no trickery, only certainty. It was as though she had waited for this moment and accepted it fully. Another advisor, younger and more aggressive, hissed loudly. "This is a threat to the throne. An outsider cannot be allowed to hold such power. If the bond remains, he could influence the nurse, and through her, the queen. He could bend our ways, corrupt our court. No, he must be removed, before this spreads like poison." His words sent another wave of murmurs through the court. half in agreement, half in fear. The queen raised her hand to silence them, her expression still unreadable. "Removed?" she asked coldly. "Do you suggest breaking the bond?" The advisor hesitated, his colors flickering nervously, and bowed his head. "No, my queen. But he could be exiled, cast away beyond our stars, where his words hold no weight." The human clenched his fists, his heart pounding. He wanted to shout that he never asked for this, that he never wanted to be tied to their laws, but he held his tongue. Something deep in his instincts told him that every word mattered here, and one wrong step could seal his doom. The queen studied him carefully, her glowing eyes searching his face as if she could read the thoughts hidden inside his skull. "Exile is an option," she said slowly, "but there are consequences. The bond is not only sacred, it is powerful. If the bonded are separated by force, the one left behind suffers. Their spirit withers, their strength fades. Some have even died from the breaking. The nurse would weaken and perhaps perish. Would you cast aside one of my most trusted by tearing her soul in half?" The advisor lowered his head, defeated, and the court fell silent once more. The human felt his skin grow cold. This was no longer just about him. His words had placed the nurse's life in his hands, whether he liked it or not, and that realization struck him with a weight heavier than chains. The queen leaned back into her throne, her expression dark. "So you see, human, your life is no longer your own. It is bound, tied to her. If you fall, she falls. If she is harmed, you will feel it. If you are torn apart, her soul will suffer. And so long as you live, you are under the protection of the vow. None may touch you without invoking the wrath of the bond, but that protection comes at a price. For you will never walk free of it." The court erupted again, some in outrage, some in awe, and the human stood trembling in the center, realizing he had stepped into a storm with no way back. The nurse's calm gaze followed him, not with pity, but with something else, something unreadable. Was it affection, duty, or a deeper plan? He could not tell, and yet, as the whispers spread and the queen's words rang in his ears, he realized the truth. This bond was not only sacred, but dangerous. A weapon and a shield, a blessing and a curse. It was something the court both feared and respected, and now it was his, whether he wished it or not. The human's life had changed forever, and as he stood in that vast hall under the weight of alien stares, he knew this was only the beginning. The vow was sealed, and the bond was dangerous. But its true cost had not yet been revealed. The hidden agenda. The human did not sleep that night. The walls of the palace chamber they gave him were carved with glowing symbols that pulsed softly in the dark like breathing stars. The bed was made of woven silver threads that shifted to support his body. Yet no comfort reached him. He lay awake, his mind replaying the events of the court again and again. The single joke that had sealed a vow, the queen's cold words, the nurse's calm acceptance, and the weight of alien eyes that had looked upon him not as a visitor, not even as a prisoner, but as something far more dangerous. Outside his door, 2 alien guards stood in silence, their weapons glowing faintly. They were not there to protect him, he realized. They were there to ensure he did not leave. His every movement now watched. His every breath accounted for. He was not free, he was bound. Not only by law, but by suspicion, by mourning. He was summoned back to the Queen's Hall. The court was not gathered this time. Only the Queen herself, her nurse, and a small circle of advisors who carried themselves with the weight of power, their cloaks brushing against the polished floor as they whispered in their strange tongue. The human was brought before them, and though his heart pounded, he stood tall, trying not to appear weak. The Queen's gaze was sharp as ever, her golden eyes like burning suns that saw through lies. "The court is divided," she said, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. "Some see you as a threat, others see you as a tool. All see you as a disruption to our order. You must understand, human. Your words and the bond they created have consequences far beyond yourself. There are those who will use you, and those who will destroy you. Before either can happen, I must know, are you worthy of the bond you carry?" The human swallowed hard. He wanted to shout that he never asked for this, but something inside warned him to choose his words carefully. "I don't know your laws, I don't know your customs," he said slowly, "but I didn't come here to be your enemy. If I have to prove myself, then I will. But I will not let anyone treat me like a weapon or a pawn." The queen's lips curved faintly, not into a smile, but into something colder. "Bold words," she said, "but words are not enough. Our empire is built on strength, on loyalty, on sacrifice. If you truly mean what you say, then you will face trials that will test you. And only then will this court decide if you are to be respected or cast aside." The nurse, who stood silently at the queen's side, shifted her gaze to the human, her calm expression unchanged. But her voice was gentle when she finally spoke. "Do not think the trial is only for you. If you fail, the bond breaks, and I fall with it. Your survival is not only your own, it is mine as well." Her words carried no fear, only certainty, as if she had already accepted whatever fate awaited. The advisors exchanged sharp glances, some clearly pleased, others worried. The human could feel the layers of politics wrapping tighter around him. It was not only about survival, it was about influence. If he proved himself in their trials, he would gain respect, perhaps even a place in their hierarchy, but if he failed, he would not only die, he would drag the nurse down with him, and in doing so, eliminate one of the queen's most trusted figures. It became clear to him then this was the hidden agenda. The bond had made him both untouchable and expendable. He could not be killed openly without dishonor, but he could be tested until he broke. Either path served the court, for if he survived, they could use him, and if he failed, their traditions would cleanse the mistake without their hands being stained. The queen leaned back in her throne, her voice calm but final. "Prepare him," she commanded. "The trial begins with the next dawn. If he survives, we will hear his voice. If he fails, his silence will serve as lesson enough." The advisors bowed, though some did so reluctantly, and the guards stepped forward to escort the human back. As they led him through the endless halls of stone and firelight, the human's thoughts raced. He understood now that every smile, every silence, every whisper in that court carried meaning he could not yet see. He was not just bound to the nurse. He was bound into their politics, into their ancient traditions, into a game where survival meant more than just living. It meant navigating the unseen blades hidden in every word. When they reached his chamber once again, the nurse followed him inside. For the first time since the vow, she was alone with him. Her presence filled the small room, tall, calm, and unshaken. She studied him quietly before speaking. "You are frightened," she said, not as a question but as fact. He exhaled sharply, running his hand through his hair. "Of course I'm frightened," he said, his voice raw. "I came here hoping for peace, or at least understanding, and now I'm trapped in laws I don't even know. Every move I make could kill me. Or you. How am I supposed to win a game where I don't even know the rules?" The nurse stepped closer, her eyes steady and unblinking. "Then you must learn quickly. Do not fight their laws. Use them. Do not show weakness, but do not lie. The bond does not forgive lies. If you walk with courage, they cannot break you. If you falter, they will tear you apart. The court is not your enemy, human, but it is not your friend either. It is a storm, and you must learn to walk through storms without being struck." Her calm certainty stirred something in him, a spark of defiance, maybe even hope. He looked at her closely, trying to see if she truly believed in him, or if she was only bound by duty. But her expression gave nothing away. Still, her words carried a strange strength, as if she had already chosen to stand with him, no matter the cost. As the night fell again and the runes glowed in the silence, the human realized that tomorrow would not only test his body, but his will. It would decide whether he was a fool who joked himself into death, or something more, something even the court could not ignore. Testing the human, the dawn came with a sky the color of burning copper. The alien city beyond the queen's palace shimmered with strange towers that reached like claws toward the heavens. Bridges of crystal stretched across wide canals of glowing liquid. and distant bells rang with a sound that felt more like vibration inside the bones than music. The human stood at the balcony of his chamber, staring at this alien sunrise. Knowing that today would decide his fate, he had not slept. His mind had been a battlefield of doubt and fear, every whisper of the court replaying in his thoughts, the nurse's calm words echoing like a quiet command. "Walk with courage. Do not falter." Now those words carried him forward, though his stomach felt heavy and his heart thudded painfully inside his chest. When the guards came, their silver armor gleaming under the strange light, he did not resist. They led him through long corridors lined with runes that flickered as he passed, almost as if the stones themselves recognized the trial that awaited him. The palace gates opened, and he was brought into the heart of the arena. The arena was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was carved into the mountain itself. With seats rising high like a jagged crown, thousands of aliens had gathered, their shifting colors painting the air like a living storm. The roar of their whispers was like the sea crashing against rocks. The queen sat at the highest throne, her crown glowing faintly under the light of the twin suns. Beside her stood the nurse, calm as ever, her gaze fixed upon him. The human's feet touched the arena floor, smooth black stone etched with spiraling patterns that glowed faintly. He felt exposed, alone, every eye upon him. His breath shallow, his body tense, the queen's voice carried across the vast space. Magnified by some unseen force, today, the human faces the trial of worth. He claims ignorance of our vows, but the bond has chosen him, and our law demands proof. He must endure the path that breaks the false and reveals the true. If he survives, the bond will be honored. If he fails, he and the nurse will fall together. Let the ancestors judge. The crowd erupted with cries, some in anger, some in excitement. The human stood frozen, his skin crawling with the weight of their judgment. The ground beneath him began to shift, stone panels sliding apart to reveal a path that descended into darkness. From deep within the earth, a wind rose, carrying the smell of ash and fire. A guard gestured for him to step forward, and though his legs felt like stone, he forced himself to move. Each step echoed in the arena as he descended into the trial. The air grew hotter, thicker, shadows stretching across the walls. Soon, the noise of the crowd faded, replaced by silence broken only by the sound of his own breathing. The corridor opened into a vast chamber lit by flames trapped inside crystal cages. Shadows danced across the walls, twisting into shapes that felt alive. A voice, deep and ancient, echoed all around him, though no one was there. "Face yourself, human, face what you fear, for only those who endure their shadow may claim the bond." At first, nothing happened, only silence and firelight. Then the air shimmered and shapes began to form. One by one they stepped out of the darkness, figures he recognized. Men in uniforms, humans from his past, some carried wounds. Others glared at him with eyes full of betrayal. Their voices rose in unison. "You left us. You failed us. You should have died with us." The human staggered back, his chest tight. These were not real, he knew that. But their words pierced deep. Memories he had buried clawed back to life. Moments of loss. Moments where comrades had fallen while he survived. Guilt he carried now weaponized against him. He forced his hands into fists, shaking his head. "You're not real," he whispered, but the voices grew louder. The faces more twisted. One stepped closer, blood dripping from its mouth. "If you cannot face us, how will you face the bond? You are weak, you are unworthy." His knees nearly buckled. But he remembered the nurse's words, "Do not falter." He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, forcing himself to stand tall. "I may have failed, I may carry scars, but I will not break here, not now." His voice rose, echoing through the chamber. "I did not choose this bond, but I will not let it destroy me, or her." The illusions screamed, their forms shattering like glass under pressure. The firelight dimmed and silence returned. The human stood shaking, drenched in sweat but unbroken. The ancient voice returned. "Calm now. You endure, but this is only the beginning." walk further, and face the trial of strength. The floor shifted again, revealing another path leading deeper into the mountain. The human pressed forward, his body exhausted, but his spirit burning brighter. He knew the court above was watching, every step judged, every weakness noted. But he also knew something else now. The bond was not just a trap, it was a challenge, a chance to prove himself not only to them but to himself. As he entered the next chamber, the ground trembled, and from the shadows emerged a beast unlike anything he had seen. Its body covered in scales of molten metal, eyes glowing like suns, its roar shook the earth. The trial of strength had begun, and with it, the question that would decide everything: could a single human stand against the nightmares of an empire and survive? The trial of fire and shadows. The beast that emerged from the shadows was like nothing the human had ever faced. Its body shimmered with molten scales that seemed alive, each plate glowing with the heat of fire trapped beneath its skin. Its claws scraped against the black stone, sending sparks into the air, and its mouth opened to reveal teeth long and curved, glowing faintly like heated blades fresh from a forge. Its eyes burned like suns, unblinking and filled with hunger. The roar it released shook the chamber, rattling the very walls and sending a wave of heat rolling toward him. The human staggered back, his heart hammering against his ribs, sweat already pouring down his face. The air itself felt heavy, choking with heat. The stone under his boots quivered as the beast stepped forward, each footfall booming like a drum of war. He had faced danger before. He had known fear before. But this was different. This was primal. It was as if the trial had pulled a nightmare from the very core of creation and set it loose against him. He looked around desperately for a weapon, but the chamber offered nothing. No sword, no spear, only firelight and shadow. His hands curled into fists, and he felt a surge of hopelessness. How could he fight something born of fire and fury with only his bare strength? Then he remembered the nurse's words, her calm, unshaken voice: "Do not falter. Walk with courage, do not lie. The bond does not forgive lies." These words echoed inside him, and he forced his trembling legs to stand firm. The beast roared again and lunged, its massive body surging forward. Claws slashing through the air, the human dove to the side, rolling across the hot stone as sparks exploded where the claws struck. He scrambled to his feet, heart pounding, every breath a struggle in the suffocating heat. The beast turned, its molten scales flickering brighter, shadows writhing on the walls as if they too wished to devour him. Then the voice returned, deep, ancient, echoing from nowhere and everywhere. Strength is not the size of the claw, nor the fire of the breath. Strength is the will that endures when all hope burns away. Show your strength, human, or be consumed. The human clenched his fists tighter. Blood dripping where his nails dug into his palms, he shouted into the chamber, his voice raw but defiant. "I don't need claws. I don't need fire. I have will, and I won't break. Not for you, not for this beast, not for anything." His words echoed, louder than the roar of the monster. The beast lunged again, its massive body blotting out the firelight, but this time the human did not dive aside. He ran forward, his heart screaming, his legs burning. At the last moment he slid beneath its slashing claws, rolling under the furnace-like body, the heat searing his skin. He came up behind it, grabbing a shard of broken stone that had cracked loose from the wall. He swung with all his strength at the glowing joint between its scales. The shard shattered in his hand, but the beast bellowed in pain. Stumbling, the chamber shook. Fire burst from cracks in the ground. Shadows twisted wildly. The human staggered but did not fall. He forced himself forward, striking again and again with his bare hands against the wounded joint, each blow tearing skin from his fists, blood mixing with the molten glow. The beast roared in fury, thrashing, but with every strike its movements grew weaker, slower, its fire dimming. At last, with one final desperate roar, the beast collapsed onto the stone, its body breaking apart into streams of molten light that seeped into the cracks of the floor. Leaving only silence and the smell of ash behind, the human collapsed to his knees. Gasping, every muscle screaming in pain, his fists raw and bleeding, sweat soaking his clothes, yet he was alive. The voice returned once more, softer now, but filled with approval. You have shown strength not of claw, but of spirit, not of fire, but of will. This trial is past, but the shadow remains. Face it, and your path will be revealed. The chamber grew darker, the flames dimming until only shadows remained. Those shadows stretched across the walls, forming shapes, twisting and shifting, until the human saw his own face staring back at him. But this was not him as he was. It was him broken, afraid. Kneeling in defeat, eyes hollow, the shadow self stepped forward, its voice a whisper, yet louder than thunder. You are nothing. You are weak. You are a fool who bound yourself with words you did not understand. You will doom her. You will doom yourself. You cannot carry the bond. The human felt his chest tighten. His breath shallow, he wanted to deny it, to shout that it was a lie. But the shadow spoke truths he feared in the depths of his soul. The fear that he was not enough, that he had stepped into a destiny too heavy for him, that he would fail not only himself, but the nurse who had accepted him. The shadow circled him, whispering, "Give up. Surrender. Let it end. You are not worthy. You never were." Its words struck deep, and for a moment his knees trembled, his heart faltered. But then he remembered the faces of the court, the cold eyes of the queen, the certainty of the nurse, and the roar of the beast he had just slain. He had survived, not because he was the strongest, but because he refused to fall. He raised his head, his voice steady despite the tremor in his body. "Maybe I am weak, maybe I am foolish, but I am still here, and I will keep standing. You can haunt me. You can whisper all you want, but I will not give up, not on myself, not on her, not on this bond," the shadow shrieked, its form breaking apart like shattered glass. Dissolving into the darkness, the chamber shook once more, but this time it was not with fury, it was with release. Light returned. Pouring down from cracks in the ceiling, warm and pure, the human collapsed to his knees, exhausted. His body broken, but his spirit blazing, stronger than ever. The voice returned for the last time. "You have faced fire. You have faced shadow. And you have not faltered. The trial is complete. Rise, human, and return to the court. Your path has only begun." The stone beneath him shifted, rising upward like a platform, carrying him back toward the arena. The roar of the crowd returning, echoing through the mountain. Thousands of alien eyes awaited. The queen's throne awaited. The nurse's steady gaze awaited. And though his body screamed with pain, the human stood tall. For he had faced fire and shadows, and he had endured. The final choice. The stone platform rose slowly from the depths of the mountain, carrying the human back into the heart of the arena. As the light of the twin suns spilled across his battered body, the gathered aliens erupted into cries that shook the air. Some voices carried awe, others carried anger, but all eyes were fixed upon him, the outsider who had endured the trial of fire and shadows. His fists were torn and bleeding, his clothes scorched and clinging to his skin, his body trembling with exhaustion, yet he stood tall, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Though pain raged in every limb, his eyes burned with a fire that none could deny. He had faced beasts of molten fury, illusions of guilt, shadows of doubt, and he had not fallen. The queen rose from her throne, her golden eyes shining brighter than ever. Her voice echoed across the arena, calm and commanding. The human has endured. He has faced what was set before him. And though his flesh is weak, his spirit did not break. He has proven strength not in claw, but in will. The trial is past. A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. Some bowed their heads reluctantly, others hissed in anger, and a few even let their colors shift into shades of respect. Yet, despite the queen's words, tension filled the air, for the trial was not the end. It was only the beginning. The queen lifted her hand and the noise fell into silence once more. But the bond remains. And now comes the question that no trial can answer. Will he accept it? Or will he reject it? The human's heart thundered in his chest. He had known this moment would come. The bond was not just a word. It was a chain, binding him to the nurse, binding his fate to hers if he accepted. He would no longer be a man free to choose his path. He would become part of their world, entangled in their politics, their traditions, their dangers. If he rejected, the bond would shatter, and the nurse would suffer, perhaps even die, and his own life would likely be forfeit. The Queen's gaze pierced him like a blade, her voice sharp. "Human, the choice is before you. You may accept the bond, and in doing so, stand as one of us, bound to the nurse, forever tied to our law and to our future, or you may reject it, and with that rejection invite death. For our law does not forgive broken vows. Speak, and let the court hear your decision." The silence that followed was heavier than any roar. The entire arena seemed to hold its breath. The advisors leaned forward, waiting. The guards gripped their spears tighter. The crowd's colors flickered with anticipation. The human looked up toward the Queen, then toward the nurse who stood beside her. The nurse's gaze was steady, her eyes calm, not pleading, not demanding, but certain. She had accepted him when he had spoken the words, and she had never faltered since. She had stood beside him with quiet strength, her life now tied to his. He searched her face for fear, for hesitation, but found none, only quiet acceptance, as though she trusted his choice no matter what it would be. The human's chest tightened. He thought of the trial, of the illusions that had accused him of weakness, of the beast that had tried to burn him, of the shadow that whispered he would doom her. He thought of his own people who might never understand this choice, who might see it as betrayal. Yet he also thought of the court, who would see his decision as destiny, and of the nurse, whose calm presence had become the one anchor in the storm. He closed his eyes for a moment, his body trembling. Then he raised his head, his voice hoarse but strong enough to carry, "I never asked for this bond. I never knew what it meant, but I will not reject it. I will not let her suffer for my mistake. I accept it. I accept her, and whatever comes with it." The words fell into the arena like a hammer strike. Silence followed, then the nurse lowered her head slightly, her voice soft but unshaken. "Then it is sealed." The Queen's golden eyes burned brighter, and for the first time her lips curved faintly, though it was not quite a smile. "So be it," she said, her voice echoing like thunder. "The human has chosen. The bond is complete. From this day, he is not outsider. He is bound. He is one of us." The arena erupted, some in cheers, others in fury. Colors flashing wildly across the crowd, the advisors argued in sharp whispers, but none could undo what had been spoken. The bond was law, and the law had been fulfilled. The guards lowered their weapons. Bowing slightly, the nurse stepped forward, her calm presence now carrying a new weight, for she was no longer only the Queen's nurse. She was bonded, and the human was now part of that bond. The court would be forced to recognize it, forced to live with it, forced to shape the future around it. The human stood trembling, not from weakness but from the enormity of what he had done. His life was no longer his own, his path no longer free. He had chosen not just survival but responsibility. He had chosen to carry the bond, to carry her fate with his. He did not know what storms lay ahead, but for the first time since he had spoken those careless words, he no longer felt like he was drowning. The Queen raised her hand once more, silencing the court. Her voice carried across the sea of colors. "The bond is not the end. It is the beginning. Let all who witness remember this day, for it marks a turning. Not only for him, but for us the ancestors watch, and the future stirs." The human looked once more at the nurse. Her calm eyes met his, and in that silent moment he understood. The bond was not a chain, not only a curse, it was also a choice to stand together. And whatever came, they would face it, not as strangers, not as enemies, but as something far more dangerous to those who doubted them. They would face it as mates,